The US President Donald Trump has made no secret of his admiration for authoritarian leaders, often referring to them as strongmen. In his first term, he historically met the reclusive dictator Kim Jong-un, and since taking office in January has re-engaged with Russia's Vladimir Putin. So, does this signal the rise of strongmen in global politics? And is Trump vying to be one of them? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Donald Trump says he has great respect for the Chinese leader Xi Jinping and gets along with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Since his inauguration in January, the US president has been strengthening his ties. Authoritarian political figures, so-called strongman leaders, which include Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin. So, what does this all mean for the future of US politics and global democracy?
The US president has long admired leaders who embodied the strongman image. In his first term, Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin, President Xi, and became the first sitting US president to enter North Korea, where he met Kim Jong-un. During his campaign for his second presidency, Trump heralded these authoritarian leaders.
Putin and the whole group, Kim Jong-un, they're tough guys out there. They're tough and they're smart and they're streetwise and they're at the top of their game. And we don't have that.
Donald John Trump do solemnly swear.
His fascinations with strongmen has continued into his second term.
I have great respect for President Xi. He's been, in a true sense, he's been a friend of mine for a long period of time. And I think that we'll end up working out something that's very good for both countries. I look forward to it.
Trump's foreign policy approach, including his willingness to abandon allies, signals a border shift that threatens to reshape US politics and democracy itself. He's even ambitious about extending his presidency beyond the two-term limit by hinting at serving a third term as US president. As authoritarian leaders gain tractions, are we witnessing a fundamental shift in global governance?
Well, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Minneapolis in the US, we have Amy Koch. She is a Republican strategist. In Washington, D.C., we have David DeRoche. He is a former official in the US Department of Defense. In Santa Teresa in Costa Rica, we have Tony Chapman. He's the host of Chatter That Matters. That's an award-winning podcast. And here with me in the studio, we have Charlotte Rica. She is a performance psychologist. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Amy, I'll come to you first. There's a saying that, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. What are we learning about Donald Trump the more we see of him with all these global strongmen?
Right. Well, first of all, it's hard for me to envision that President Trump has a lot of friends. And only because he's main character, right? It's main character all the time for him. So I see these things. He talks about, so-and-so is my good friend. So-and-so is my great friend. I really feel like that's kind of just part of his hyperbole that he talks about. My concern comes in when I think about sort of going off script, doing some meetings with folks that are, like, for example, some of the meetings that took place with Putin in Riyadh. While I trust the likes of Secretary of State Rubio, I get very concerned sort of about understanding fully the impact of those meetings and the words that he has in those meetings and any kind of trust level with the likes of Putin. As a former Russian linguist in the Air Force in a different life, I fully understand sort of the complexity and the difficulty with Russia and our relationships with them. And I want to make sure that people are in the room and that have the power and the say at the table with President Trump when it comes to sort of dealing with dictators of that sort.
David, to you, what do you think President Trump's admiration for these strongmen tells us about him? Where does all this stem from?
Well, I I got to start by saying I agree with Amy that a lot of it, I think, is just hyperbole. I think that he, his business background, you set the table, and his setting the table prior to a discussion is by saying something nice about the person, whether he believes it or not. But I think that, not being a career politician, I think that he probably finds it easier to deal with people when, if they shake hands and make a deal, the deal is done. They don't say, well, okay, now I have to go back to my parliament. So, I have an issue in my coalition where, we'll have to make some concessions. I think that, we keep forgetting, but I have more in common with a Belgian defense expert than I do with an automobile worker in Detroit. There's this sort of international commentariat, political and policy elite that kind of thinks the same way, regardless of nationality. Trump's not part of that. And so I think when people like us look at Trump, it's confounding. And I think that we tend to project our worst fears on him. But, he's seen it go wrong with the Korean dictator. Where he thought he could just get in a room and make a deal. And I think that he's probably a little bit more hesitant than he was before. But again, I think his preference is for dealing with people where once you shake the hand, you're done. And I think that that's something he's not going to outgrow.
Tony, your thoughts on Trump's admiration for all these strong men?
I want to throw a little bit of a curveball into this because I think we tend to put Trump and Xi Jinping and everybody is sort of the dictators in the world, but isn't it human nature when we seek power to want to dictate our point of view? I mean, a CEO comes into a company and they want to have their strategies executed. And I'd even say yours, as your show continues to build in popularity, I have to believe that there's times where you really want to influence direction and you get very frustrated if there's people in the room that don't share your point of view. So I think what's important is that within human nature, those who seek power seek to have a perfectly paved speedway ahead of them. Get into politics now, and I would argue that even in Western democracies now, we're seeing a lot of leaders trying to not have parliament, not have opposition, sign executive orders, just have their mandates pushed through. We had our Parliament suspended in Canada for 8 weeks and billions of dollars were spent without any opposition because Parliament wasn't allowed to contest it. So my point with Trump is he is just that on steroids. He believes that the United States Congress, the Supreme Court, all of this is just unnecessary. He has a vision. He chooses to execute it. And therefore, he admires people that actually have that power. He says, oh my God, this is what I need. I need to have citizens just to bow to me. And that's why I think he's so fascinated with these three individuals, because in every case, and I'm also obviously talking about Mohammed bin Salman as well, every one of these people could say jump and everybody goes how high. And I think for some reason, that's something that's absolutely exciting to Trump because he wants to have that magic wand persona around him. And the challenge he faces obviously is the U.S. Constitution. So it's interesting to see why he admires them. I don't think he admires them as individuals. I don't think he admires their culture, but what he does admire is their power.
Charlotte, it all sounds like a psychologist's dream, which is why we have you here today. Tell me, what's going on with the psychology of Trump? Why does he like these men?
Okay, first of all, I kind of want to unpick the whole idea of strength. And my first thought when I was asked to come on this show was, well, are we talking about strongman politics or are we talking about strong men? Because they're totally different things. So if we're talking about strongman politics, we're talking about dominance and ego and control. And if we're talking about strength, we're talking about vulnerability and compassion and trust. And I think the one thing that all these leaders were talking about, they have psychological traits in common, okay? And these psychological traits are, it's high dominance and it's low empathy. They're authoritarian. They have narcissistic traits. And a key trait of that is grandiosity. And when it comes to Trump, so his grandiosity, it's not bravery or bravado. It's basically psychological armor. So this grandiosity is hiding his insecurities. I mean, I don't think he's a strong man. I think with that fear comes paranoia and control, and black and white thinking. And I think that for him, it's about winners and losers. So I don't think when we talk about Trump, I don't think we can talk about strength. I think we can talk about strongman politics.
So you don't think he's a strong man?
No, I mean, no, I think it's so transparent that he's not a strong man. I think that his insecurities, that's what he's trying to cover up, and he surrounds himself with these powerful men. It's, it's sort of, it's mutual grandiosity, right? It's like, you're powerful. If you like me, I must be powerful. And the thing with Trump is he is obsessed with winning. Okay, so he has these fears, right? That's what's driving him. It's fear. So it's fear of being irrelevant. It's fear of being forgotten. It's fear of losing. So winning to him is everything, right? He has what we call a transactional view of his self-worth. So he looks for external validation. And that external validation comes with winning. So as long as he's winning, he feels he has value. And that value, that is kind of protects his self-identity and his ego, and it shields him from his insecurities. But the thing with winning is you're only as good as your last win. And so that's what he's constantly trying to do, right? Every single new transaction he has, it's all about winning. And to him, that defines his whole sense of being, which I think, if you want to get to daddy issues, that's why I don't think he's a strong man.
Thank you, Charlotte. Amy, I'm intrigued by something David brought up, where he said it's all about the deal with Trump. And do you think he really admires people that when he shakes their hand and they say something is going to happen, they don't have to go back to Parliament, they don't have to have a referendum, they don't have to have anyone else's opinion, deal done, and he will do this because he just said he will?
Yeah, because that goes back to his background in business, correct? And so often I see this in politics when you've got a person that's been successful in some other part of their life, whether it's sports figures, business, whatever it could be, where they've achieved greatly in one section of their life. They sort of almost assume that they're going to be fantastic in politics. I never understand people kind of think like politics is just an easy win or an easy game to play. And then person after person that I see kind of go through the grist mill struggles to understand that politics doesn't work like that, at least not in a democracy, not under a constitution. And that can be very frustrating to all of those people that run into that. And some fail spectacularly and some learn. I think in this case, it's been a little bit of both for Trump. It's hard to ignore the fact he talked very openly about in 2016. He had no idea, and he won. And I think everyone was surprised, including himself, that he won, although not all of us were surprised, given it was really more about Hillary losing than Trump winning. But he went to Washington. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know who to trust. He didn't have people around him because this was not his world. And that has definitely changed. And he has definitely grown and learned, or at least demonstrated that in some way. I think all the executive orders he signed, right? He loves to sign an executive order that's saying he's trying to get something done, whether or not that can even actually get accomplished. He signs an executive order that we all need photo ID. Well, that's not exactly how elections work in this country. The states decide about election law. And so he signs an executive order that is, largely meaninless. But he feels great that he signed it, and he gets kudos from his supporters. And so for him, is that the win? That might be just the win he needs without actually making policy change.
David, when we look around the world, the three biggest, most powerful countries, the United States, Russia, and China, all led by very similar traits and similar men, how concerned should the rest of us be that this is the way the world is going now?
Well, I don't want to be a jerk here, but I got to disagree with your premise. I mean, Xi worked his way up through the party system. He to include years living in a cave as a rural organizer. So I can't imagine a person more different than Trump, who was a lifelong Democrat until he decided to enter politics and realized that as a Democrat, you have to work your way up through a system, whereas as a Republican, you just run and get the most votes. But in terms of leadership, I think that Trump's approach, again, is probably more shaped by business than his personal psychology. I think it's his experience. And, realizing that we don't have any way to bludgeon Russia or China into doing what we want to do. We have to engage them. So, his autobiography is entitled The Art of the Deal. So figure out what the deal is, make it, and make it on the most advantageous terms. The question is whether he has the tools to actually determine what is the most advantageous terms and how to implement them. And I think that it's really as simple and as complicated as that.
Tony, power is extremely addictive. We know that. Nobody wants to give it up. We saw Margaret Thatcher finally shedding a tear when she was forced out of Downing Street. She is going to run China for as long as he lives. That's the impression we get. The same with Putin in Russia. What happens in 4 years' time if Donald Trump decides, I'm such a strong man, I want to stay on?
Oh, he's already planting that seed with people that, again, he's ignoring one of the great constitutions that was created as a republic for the people and by the people, pursuit of happiness. That none of this stuff matters to him. It's his legacy. And when you listen to Donald Trump, he says there's nobody smarter than Donald Trump when it comes to AI, advanced manufacturing, humanity, every subject in the world. There's nobody that knows more than Donald Trump. And I think a very important point is when we're talking about this art of the deal, great deal makers focus on transformation. How can we work together and transform things for the better? What I think Donald Trump is focused on is transactions. And his art of the deal is this immediacy to get a win and to walk away and say, look what we accomplished today. And that's a very dangerous place, because when you're running the world's largest economy and you're focused and obsessed by transactions, you start imposing things like tariffs because you immediately see, oh, there's going to be a win. This is how we'll pay off our deficit, versus transformation. What is this going to actually mean? What is a material value to the people living in my country and the people around the world that I'm impacting? And that's, to me, where the danger of Donald Trump is. He wants the Statue of Liberty torn down and have a statue of Donald Trump when he's done. That's his obsession. And I'll also make a point, which I think was very, very well done, in the sense of the bully and the victim. Both of them are incredibly insecure individuals. And I would agree with you that Donald Trump, if you're Kim Jong-un and you want to win over Donald Trump, you fawn him with how brilliant he is, how wonderful he is, how amazing he is. And next thing you know, Donald Trump is just glowing. So the art of the deal is about transformation, and his vulnerability is his ego and his what I think was pointed out, his insecurity. And that's what frightens me the most. Transactional, and how vulnerable he is to praise and world leaders that really are our enemies fawning over him.
Charlotte, do you think from a psychologist's perspective, he's a vulnerable man?
Yes. I mean, yes to everything that's just been said. I mean, exactly that. The word transactional. I mean, I talked about the view of he has a transactional view of himself. And so it's all about winning. So every bit of validation he gets from the external world. So it's not just transactional for his own self-worth. He then is transactional with people that he is interacting with. And so with the likes of, for example, with Elon Musk, it's that idea of, okay, that's the wealthiest man in the world. If he likes me, that must make me great, right? And vice versa. He's thinking, there's the most powerful man in the world. If he likes me, that makes me great. So it's a lot of ego mirroring going on. And this sort of, this mutual grandiosity. And it's really dangerous. It's ego politics. And I think it's very, very dangerous. And I know he's a businessman, 100% he's a businessman, but he's a businessman driven by ego. And he's all about the short win. He's all about the short win. He's not about playing the long game. And I think it is terrifying.
Amy, to you, do you think President Trump's strongman persona emboldens other leaders around the world? That if he's behaving like that in the White House, for example, belittling President Zelensky, as we saw famously on TV just a few weeks back, do you think that kind of emboldens other leaders that they can get away with such behavior?
I think that Trump's behavior, whether it's emboldening world leaders, or as you see the political discourse in America has really downgraded. Now, I don't pretend for a second that all hinges on Trump. Our political discourse was downgrading for a decade before he even showed on the scene, at least. But I think it does sort of give a seal of approval to those sort of things. It moves the needle on what is proper and what is done and what is known and sort of the institutions. Just as anytime someone comes in and moves the needle a little bit, does something on an institutional level in Washington, right? Then the next time around, so let's say a party does something unusual. The Democrats make a move that's never been seen before in the U.S. Senate. Well, then the next time the Republicans come in, they feel very comfortable using that same tactic. And it just it drives down the institution. It is the same with Trump, but it is on, as someone said earlier, steroids. Everything he does is larger and magnified and covered 1,000-fold across the world. And so the impact of what he does is just so much bigger. And he takes what has been a problem and been trending in American politics and drags that further. And what I worry about is, has he taken something that's been maybe trending in international politics, which is this strongman persona, and is he adding his fire, fuel to that fire?
David, it's interesting to note that President Trump has never been a wartime leader. He's never sent American troops into battle. I mean, I think of both Bush presidents, over the years, many presidents have sent troops into battle. So while he has this persona of being the strong man, he's not really flexed his muscles militarily.
Yeah, good question. So he has not sent troops into battle per se, but he had troops in battle while he was president. And, he wanted to withdraw from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and was persuaded not to by his security advisors and military advisors, which is not something that we commonly take into mind. But, I think in many ways, the real legacy of Trump is not in encouraging people like him, but rather the rise of people who are the exact opposite. If you look at Keir Starmer and Mark Carney in Britain and Canada, what you have are hyper acceptable people who are not politicians, who, and even Joe Biden, he was a presidential campaign, there was no great passion behind him, but he was electable and acceptable and a very, very opposite to this Trump style. And when you look at Carney, Starmer, not career politicians, and to a certain extent Biden, one of the great questions people are asking is, are they really in charge? So the reaction to him of the hyper acceptable person who may or may not be in charge, but at least conforms to the conventions we expect of a politician, may be the lasting legacy rather than the encouragement of strong men and people who are rude and sharp-elbowed.
Tony, your home country, Canada, you have an election coming up to elect your next leader. Would you like to see a strong man or indeed a strong woman step up to take on Trump?
I think we're spending too much time in Canada focusing on Trump and not enough focusing on what we need to do to solidify our sovereignty and our identity going forward. We're so dependent on America right now. As I said last time, they sneeze, we catch pneumonia. And yet all the attention's on Trump and his tariffs, and not enough is on why aren't we fixing our ports so that we can export our commodities and our resources to the world? Why aren't we building pipelines? Why aren't we taking Canadian ingenuity, which is so world renowned, but at the same time, the second they need capital, they have to escape the United States to find it. So we got our own backyard to worry about. And what I would love to see, whoever wins this election, get serious about how much money we've wasted over the last decade on spreading ideology of a few paid for by the many, and not enough focused on how are we going to set up the next generation, not with this debt that we've incurred, but set them up with a new economy where there's purposeful jobs. And that's what we got to focus on. The trouble with Trump is we get so captivated by this ego and dictatorship. And I would argue that, you look at Steve Jobs, he was a dictator. Like him or not, I had Guy Kawasaki on. He was a horrible person to work for. He created Apple. That's a certain type of leader. They exist all through society. I think the difference with democracies and politicians that have that mentality is they just can't understand why they have to deal with opposition, why they even have to deal with their own cabinet. They're a CEO. They make a decision, just execute it. And that's where I think we have a problem with this type of individual within a democracy, because democracy is not supposed to function that way. It's supposed to be about meeting in the middle ground, consensus, collaboration. I'm going to trade off a little bit. You're going to trade off a little bit. But you know what? Our society is going to be better for it.
Thanks, Tony. Charlotte, final point to you. If you were to sit down with President Trump as a psychologist, what kind of questions would you ask him?
Daddy issues?
Really?
Yeah. I mean, yes. I think we all know that what kind of man his father was, and he instilled in that. Trump speaks openly about that killer instinct that was instilled into him from an early age, and I think he was made to feel like a failure. His dad made all the money, right? And so he operates from a place of fear. This is what I think, and that is a very, very dangerous place to operate from. And I think, as Tony was saying there, democracy is not about dominance, right? Democracy is about dialogue. And Trump, dialogue that's not really, ironically, that's not really in his, that's not really a word he uses, right? He's not up for dialogue. He's up for dominance and power. And I think really, if you sat in front of me, I'd really want to talk about his childhood, his upbringing, what makes him tick. But he's a narcissist. He's never going to go for therapy. You know, there's no way. Everyone else is to blame. I mean, you know, the whole thing about being a narcissist, you never recognize your own insecurities, your own problems. And most people, when they have self-doubt, or they'll seek external validation in terms of a therapist. He seeks external validation in terms of another win. And that is what I think is so dangerous about him. He doesn't want to ever acknowledge or address any of his insecurities. Vulnerability is a strength. It's not a weakness. But he sees it as a weakness. And I think that's what's the most dangerous thing about him.
Have you ever met anyone like him in your working life as a psychologist?
No, luckily, no. No, I haven't. God hope I don't ever.
Charlotte, thank
Where's
you.
your sense of adventure?
There we go, Tony. It's potentially a client for the future. Tony, David, and Amy, and Charlotte here in the studio.
Thank
Thank you all so much. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me and Brady and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.